One of the most deplorable crimes a person can commit is to sexually abuse an innocent child. Children are our country's most precious assets, and therefore we must protect them to ensure a bright future. The issue being debated here today is whether the laws, policies, and institutions aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual abuse and exploitation are adequate. My worthy opponents claim that they are not, that as a nation, Dominica has failed to put in place the proper legislative framework and policy guidelines to protect our precious, vulnerable children. Judges, let me assure you that that is absolutely not the case. Before I prove this to you beyond any doubt, allow me to define a few key terms. The Oxford Dictionary defines law as the system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members, and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. Additionally, it defines policy as a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by an organization or individual. And finally, it defines institution as an established law or practice. According to the laws of Dominica, specifically the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1036, the term minor refers to a person under the age of 18 years. However, anyone under the age of 16 is not legally capable of consenting to sex. Furthermore, according to an official United Nations website, sexual exploitation is defined as an abuse of someone's position of vulnerability to obtain sexual favors. It also includes trafficking and prostitution, and it defines sexual abuse as the physical intrusion of a sexual nature, whether by force or under unequal or coercive conditions. My team and I conducted a thorough research into the laws, policies, and institutions of Dominica with regards to child sexual abuse and exploitation, and we have found that they have been meticulously structured to provide the best possible protection for our children. In my delivery, I will highlight a few of the many laws aimed at safeguarding children against 1. Sexual exploitation, and 2. Sexual abuse. Let's begin with the matter of sexual exploitation. As I stated earlier, the United Nations basically defines sexual exploitation as abusing a position of authority to obtain sexual favors from a minor. Sex trafficking and child prostitution are major problems worldwide. This is without a doubt one of the most repugnant crimes that an individual can commit. Judges, the laws of Dominica do not take these acts lightly. According to the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1036, Section 18, a person who procures, which means to source, acquire, or pay for a minor, is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to imprisonment for up to 25 years. Additionally, according to Section 23, a person who is the owner, occupier, or manager of any premises where a child under 16 years of age is being used for sexual intercourse is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to imprisonment for 10 years. Capable opponents, the laws of this land are clear and strict. Any person who solicits a minor under 18 to engage in sex in exchange for money, goods, or favors can be convicted and sentenced to a decade and a half in prison. Even someone who owns the building and knowingly permits the prostitution of a minor can be convicted and sentenced to 10 years. As a matter of fact, anyone who has reasonable grounds for believing that a child under the age of 16 is being abused is legally obligated to report it, according to Section 31 of the Act. Failure to do so could result in a fine of $30,000 and imprisonment for a term of 5 years. Does that sound lenient to you? Sadly, Sexual exploitation of children often comes from a trusted authority figure in their lives. The laws of Dominica strongly condemn any such abuse of authority. Section 6, 9, and 10 cover cases where the child is exploited by a blood relative or by any other authority, such as a guardian, adopted parents, or an employer, and each scenario carries up to 25 years. Madam Moderator, the law leaves no stone unturned. There is zero tolerance for child sexual exploitation in any form. Secondly, let us address child sexual abuse. As we have established, the age of consent is 16. Therefore, any adult who has sexual contact with someone under 16 is guilty of an offense on the crime of sexual abuse. Using force makes it even worse and will compound the charges. However, even in the case where the minor agreed, the law does not recognize consent. According to Section 7 of the Sexual Offences Act, this applies whether or not the abuser believes the victim is older than they are. So for all the perverts who say, you don't have the body of a child, or the most overused one, you are mature for your age, pretending to be ignorant of the age of a minor does not excuse you under the laws of Dominica. Even when you have been lied to, legally it is your responsibility to verify. Worthy opponents, does the law sound lenient to you? It goes even further than just sexual intercourse. Section 14 discusses gross indecency, which includes groping or touching the private body parts of a minor, and presenting a minor with pornography, whether in person or electronically. This carries a prison sentence of up to 20 years. Madam Moderator, Section 22 even addresses sexual grooming of a minor under 16 years of age. It states that any adult person that carries on communication with a minor and meets that minor in any part of the world with the intention of having a sexual or romantic relationship can be convicted for up to 14 years in prison. Honorable judges, clearly the laws are very stringent on this matter. Now, let's make one thing clear. As diligent as the law is, it cannot control the thinking or behavior of perverted individuals, and therefore it cannot entirely eliminate sex crimes against children. The laws of the United States with regards to child sexual abuse and exploitation are arguably very strict. And yet, a report from the University of Pennsylvania revealed that between 100,000 and 300,000 women and children are forced into sexual slavery in the United States every year. This is the sad reality of the dark and evil nature of some humans. Judges, I am sure my worthy opponents are prepared to share with you some heartbreaking individual stories. But please remember, the topic today addresses the adequacy of the laws themselves, not the non-compliance of a few deviants. Worthy opponents, the facts presented are undeniable. The laws, policies, and institutions in Dominica with regards to child sexual abuse and exploitation are indeed adequate. Thank you.
Honorable judges, my most worthy opponents, supporters, my esteemed colleague, good afternoon. In 2017, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and the United Nations Children's Fund commissioned an assessment of the child protection and child justice systems across all 9 OECS states. They reported, and I quote, "The law on its own will not be enough to sufficiently transform the child justice landscape of Dominica. Law reform is most effective when combined with a number of other essential ingredients, including robust social service infrastructure, strong programming, capacity building, and well-considered policy." End quote. Today, my colleague and I stand firmly in our opposition to the moot that the laws, policies, and institutions aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse are adequate. Permit me to define the key terms. According to the Oxford Dictionary, laws are rules that deal with a particular crime. Policies, according to the Center for Disease Control, is a law, regulation, procedure, administrative action of governments and other institutions. Institutions are organizations founded for a religious, educational, professional, or social purpose. Sexual exploitation is an actual or attempted abuse of someone's position of vulnerability, power, or trust to obtain sexual favors. According to the Children and Young Persons Act of Dominica, child is defined as a person under the age of 14 years. And finally, the Law's Black's Dictionary defines adequate as sufficient, equally efficient, equal to what is required, and suitable to the case or occasion. As a first speaker for the opposition, I will be presenting on 1. The inadequacies of the laws, and 2. The inadequacies of the policies aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse. My colleague will be expounding on the inadequacy of the institutions dedicated to the point. Firstly, the laws in Dominica aimed at protecting children from sexual exploitation and abuse are inadequate because the rate of reports is still high, while the rate of convictions is very low. Cases are not expedited, and the penalties are very lenient. Let us look at the problem of low convictions. In 2016, the Sexual Offences Act was revised to accommodate several needed changes. Admittedly, the efforts to include measures relating to mandatory reporting of crimes, greater penalties for offences, among other critical things, are certainly commendable. However, there is still a marked increase in reports, but a low number of convictions. This is an indication that something is not right. Let us look at the numbers. According to the Criminal Investigations Department of the Commonwealth of Dominica Police Force, in 2018, the total number of reported cases of sexual exploitation and abuse was 45. By 2020, that number increased to 58 and moved steadily up to 79 by 2022. Shocking, right? Here's why. The court system does not expedite sexual offense cases. Sadly, the law has no limitations on the number of times a child victim can be questioned and examined after the abuse has taken place. My most worthy opponents, as a young person, I am usually afraid when I think of the reality of what happens in my country. Why is it that the court system seems to be going out of its way to facilitate these predators, yet the victims are rarely considered? Do you know that this story could have been easily typed and filed? If the law is as adequate as you claim it is, why isn't the paper committal clause used for not some, but all of the cases involving child sexual abuse? My most worthy opponents, do you know that 6 days ago, on March 29, 2023, Dominica News Online reported, under the heading, Resident Judge Encourages Police Investigators to Revise Method of Investigation in Sexual Offenses. Clearly, we have a problem that needs to be addressed. This fits in perfectly with what Sister Tina Alexander, mental health social worker and qualified counselor, said in an interview. She stated, and I quote, "One of the main reasons for the withdrawal or lack of conviction of reported crimes of sexual exploitation and abuse is the length of time the matter takes to reach a conviction. Changing the law without changing the structure of the court does not help the victim. Right now, the whole process of investigating sexual crimes against children is abusive," end quote. Furthermore, the law is inadequate as a result of poor enforcement because the penalties are not severe enough to be any actual deterrent. According to the Sexual Offences Act amended in 2016, Section 14.1, any person who commits an act of gross indecency with another person is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to imprisonment. If the complainant is a minor under 16 years of age, for 14 years a first offense and to imprisonment for 20 years for a subsequent offense. End quote. Very detailed, I must say. However, over the years, there have been numerous examples of reduced sentences for sexual predators due to simple things such as good character, guilty plea, among other trivial reasons. Even with strong laws in place, if there is a lack of resources and political will to enforce them, perpetrators may not be held accountable for their actions, leading to impunity and continued harm against our children. Additionally, cultural and societal attitudes towards sexual exploitation may create an environment where enforcement is not prioritized, making it difficult to effectively address the issue of weak penalties. For the law to be considered sufficient, we need to stop considering the feelings and good behavior of the perpetrators and consider the crime that they have committed. My second point is the policies are inadequate. In preparation for this debate, my colleague and I conducted a survey across Dominica to get the public's view on the topic of the debate here today. 60% of the respondents stated that the penalties of the law are too lenient, while the other 30% indicated that the process is too long and too slow. Do you know, my most worthy opponents, God forbid that you are molested or raped after you have given your testimony, been examined by several doctors, been to court once or twice, faced your abuser just for him to tell you are lying. If you decide that you are tired with the long and traumatic process and say you no longer want to pursue the matter, the case dies. I know, surprising. The evidence is there, the crime has been proven, yet the abuser goes free. Why? Poor policies, inadequate policies. Let us consider the matter of mandatory reporting. Madam Moderator, my opponents may say that there is a mandatory report clause in the law, but how many of these cases were convicted because of reports? How often does this happen in Dominica? Do you think that because there are no reports, abuse is just somehow not taking place? I wish. Honorable judges, consider the Education Act, the governing document for educational activity on island. It is the rule of law for the place where our children will spend most of their day. It concerns me that there is little to no stipulation within the Act about how one should deal with the issue of reporting sexual abuse at schools. There is no policy that dictates that teachers have to present a police record or background checks are to be made on them before they interact with our children. But what am I saying? There is no sex offenders registry in Dominica. For years, we have been speaking about it over and over and over again, and here we are in the year 2023 with nothing. Don't believe me? Well, on May 20th, 2014, Mr. Francis Joseph, among other activists, demanded an explanation from the judge when the judge threatened the full force of the court if the names of the perpetrators were published. This threat was in direct opposition to the law. According to Section 38(1)(b) of the Sexual Offences Act of 1998, the name of the accused can be published, and I quote, after the person has been tried and convicted of the offense, end quote. Fast forward 8 years later, different act amended in 2016, same clause. On July 22nd, 2022, Dominica News Online released an article, and I quote, Minister for National Security and Home Affairs, Reuben Blackmore, says that the government of Dominica is open to the idea of introducing a sex offenders registry. Well, let's wait. It is definitely coming. Honorable judges, there are too many factors which render the laws and policies that are aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse ineffective. As I take my seat for now, I would like to remind you, my most worthy opponents, as Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa and anti-apartheid revolutionary, stated, and I quote, our children are our greatest treasure. They are our future. Those who abuse them tear at the fabric of our society and weaken our nation. End quote. Please, let us not support this behavior. Thank you.
Honorable judges, generous sponsors, our gracious audience, and our worthy opponents, a pleasant good afternoon to you all. Are the laws, policies, and institutions aimed at protecting the children of Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse adequate? My colleague and I are convinced that they are. Capable opponents, did you listen as she explained how robust the Sexual Offences Act of Dominica is, and how it covers almost every imaginable crime that could be perpetrated against minors? I am sure after hearing this, the judges agree that the laws have been carefully designed to protect the children of Dominica. I will now discuss the institutions and policies that have been put in place with the sole purpose of child protection. As my teammate stated earlier, the Oxford Dictionary defines institution as an established law or practice. However, it also offers this alternative definition: an organization founded for religious, social, educational, and professional purposes. Dominica's main institution or organization for the protection of children is the Social Welfare Division. This institution is filled with dedicated and caring individuals. The Welfare Division provides counseling to families and individuals. They also work along with school counselors and peer counseling groups. Additionally, they are responsible for organizing and coordinating the foster care program of Dominica. This involves assessing hundreds of potential foster parents to ensure that they can provide safe, healthy, comfortable, and loving homes for children, many of whom have been rescued from a sexually abusive situation. The Welfare Division also has a special child abuse protection unit. In an interview with the coordinator and one other member of staff in this unit, our team learned that any report of child sexual abuse or exploitation is taken very seriously. Holistic assessments of the school, community, and the home are conducted in collaboration with an officer from the Criminal Investigation Department of the Police Force. During the course of an investigation, if the claims of child abuse or exploitation are substantiated, then the Welfare Division always does what is in the best interest of the child. Capable opponents, these hard-working individuals often have the heart-wrenching job of separating a child from a dangerous environment, even when the child themselves does not want to leave. But they must do what is in the best interest of that child. Can you imagine how emotionally draining this job is? And yet, they do it day after day and year after year to protect our children. How dare we say that this institution is not adequate? The first line of defense for investigating cases of child abuse and exploitation and protecting victims is the police. What are the policies of the Dominica Police Force with regards to investigating the sexual exploitation and abuse of children? Madam Moderator, the public is often quick to condemn the efforts of the police. We hear people claim that the police do not have proper investigative strategies, or that they simply do not care about the victim. But my team and I interviewed an inspector of the Dominica Police Force, and we were assured that this is absolutely not the case. Worthy opponents, did you know that such a high priority was placed on this matter, that the Dominica Police Force, the Ministry of Health, and the Welfare Division collaborated to produce a 32-page policy document outlining the proper handling of rape and sexual assault cases? These policies have been carefully crafted to dignify the victim without compromising the investigation. Let me share with you some examples of excellent police policy. 1. The child should always be questioned in the presence of a parent or guardian. And when the parent or guardian is the one accused, a welfare officer will be contacted and assigned as a guardian. 2. All female victims over the age of 14 should be referred to a gynecologist on call. However, those under the age of 14 should be referred to a pediatrician who then must request assistance from the gynecologist on call. 3. Any specimen collected from the victim during the medical exam must be handed over to the police, who will sign to confirm receipt of the samples. And the medical examiner also records the name, rank, and number of the officer to protect the chain of custody. These are just a few examples, And there are many more. And these policies are actually in harmony with international standards. Judges, it is abundantly obvious that the laws, policies, and institutions aimed at protecting the children of Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse have been conscientiously designed to provide the best standard of protection. Therefore, we are confident in our position that they are adequate. Thank you.
I stand with my colleague in opposition of the mood that the laws, policies, and institutions aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse are adequate. I have listened to my opponents, and I am still shocked by the arguments which they are presenting. Do we live in the same Dominica? Even after my colleague has exposed the inadequacies of the laws and policies, are you genuinely satisfied that justice is being served? Tell me, my most worthy opponents, if the institutions which are aimed at protecting our children from sexual exploitation and abuse are providing such adequate protection, then why are such cases increasing? Today, I'll be examining the inadequacies of the following institutions: the family, the school, the church, and the welfare division. Firstly, let us examine the inadequacy of the family. Presently in our society, many of our parents are young adults and some even teenagers who are not ready to become parents. Many are unable to notice the signs of abuse and they do not know what to do if this is shared with them. Support groups are limited. Family counseling is almost non-existent and the family court is absent. This leaves the family ill-equipped from protecting their children. Thus, the child is left exposed and defenseless. Honorable judges, according to the reports from 2018 to 2020 by the Criminal Investigation Department, there was a total of 349 cases of child abuse and sexual exploitation in categories such as unlawful sexual intercourse and connection, indecent assault, incest, burglary, among many others. That's 349 cases, too many. Madam Moderator, families in poverty are the breeding grounds for sexual exploitation and abuse among children. Instead of leaving their homes, parents take hush money in hopes to care for their family. My worthy opponents, our society is concerned. My colleague and I conducted a survey across Dominica in preparation for this debate and response to the question of whether the institutions which cater to this problem are adequate. 81.3% responded no. That's a lot of no's. Guess what? Who feels it, knows it. The second institution is the school, which was created to train, nurture, and protect children. Staff of the early childhood and daycare centers are not even equipped or trained to properly report abuse. Additionally, it may be argued that high schools are now equipped with their own guidance counselors who are able to counsel victims and report sexual offenses to the authorities. But wait a minute, let me enlighten you, my friends. Did you know that to provide therapy, one should possess a master's degree in counseling psychology or clinical psychology? According to a welfare officer, some government schools have guidance counselors with only a bachelor's degree, thus making them unqualified to provide therapy. What a sad reality we face here in this country. Furthermore, have you ever thought of the chain of command for a report to be filed? Child confesses to counselor, counselor reports to principal, principal to educational minister, minister to PS, PS to minister, minister to police or welfare department. That can take months, and confidentiality can be compromised. Meanwhile, the child is in the same place where he or she was or is being abused. Thirdly, the church. We are cultured to believe that the church is the lighthouse and the beacon of hope for the community. However, it has sadly become one of the places where abuse and sexual exploitation are swept under the rug, as pastors defend deacons and acolytes defend priests and members defend and protect their pastors. When this is done, what happens next? When the very leaders you look up to and you trust crush your already broken spirits, where do you go? When God-fearing people protect your abuser instead of protecting you, the abused, who do you go to? And what happens to them? Nothing. Yet my opponents still have the audacity to tell me that what is being done in our institutions in Dominica are adequate? Come on, we can and must do better than that. However, we must admit that some churches try to protect the children, but are churches equipped and qualified? Is there a set structure in place that must be followed for reporting? Based on interviews conducted with various leaders of several churches in Dominica, there is no set structure to follow when an incident of child sexual abuse is reported. According to Pastor Joseph, and I quote, "We are to call the police." End of quote. Reverend Fraser indicated that at present, her church is setting up a policy, a faith-guarding policy, to protect the vulnerable. So my most worthy opponents, if the protection provided by our institutions are so adequate, why is there a need for the formulation of such policies? Pressure is therefore placed on institution number 4, the Social Welfare Division, the only government institution in Dominica to fight child abuse. And we must admit that they are being overworked, with only 4 child protection officers and only 1 counselor to service the entire population. Obviously, this number of personnel cannot adequately handle all of the cases of the entire nation. And in case you question the accuracy of this, you can inquire from any welfare officer of the division. Honorable, I stand resolute in my position. Our institutions are inadequate because 1, the family is not equipped. 2, the churches have no set structure. 3, the schools is handicapped. And 4, the welfare department is overburdened. Thank you.
Good day to all once again. I listened carefully to my worthy opponent's arguments, and it is clear that they are passionate about protecting children from sexual abuse and exploitation. Judges, let me assure you that we are too, and we strongly believe that the laws, policies, and institutions in Dominica have been designed to do just that. My worthy opponents claim that the laws are not adequate. However, our research has proven that the laws in Dominica with regards to child sexual abuse are actually up to date with international standards. My worthy opponents also said that confidentiality can be compromised. But our research has shown that police will sign to confirm receipts, and examiners will also record the name, rank, and number of the officer to protect the chain of custody. My worthy opponents also stated that some people will not receive or are not receiving adequate sentencing, and conviction rates are low. However, honorable judges, keep in mind that in a court of law, a judge's sentencing capabilities are limited based on the evidence that was presented. If the prosecution fails to present a strong case, then the judges will be limited. Also, if the police fail to do a proper investigation, then there will not be a lot of evidence to build a case on. When this happens, it reflects a failure on the part of these individuals to follow the established laws and policy guidelines. It does not reflect inadequacy of the laws themselves. Worthy opponents, even though some individuals in our system may fail to enforce what has been established, our thorough research has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that the laws, policies, and institutions of Dominica with regards to child sexual abuse and exploitation are indeed adequate. Thank you.
Good day again. Allow me to reiterate our position in this debate we stand strong in our opposition to the moot that the laws and policies and institutions that are aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse are adequate. I know that my opponents suggested in their speech that the laws are designed to protect children and the laws do what is in the best interest of the children. But I would like to remind you that when the investigation is actually being done, children can be questioned without limit and have to relive their trauma over and over again. How is that in the best interest of the child? Also, there is no sex offenders registry. If a sex offender moved right down the street from you, you would have no idea because nobody is privy to that information. Also, while my opponents argue that welfare helps with counseling, fostering, and dealing with sexual abuse, our position is that they want to, but are limited in their abilities. Yes, welfare is tasked with dealing with sexual abuse. And yes, they try their best, but they have a limited staff and are clearly overworked. One counselor, imagine that, one counselor for 349 children. Impossible. And finally, my most worthy opponents, you made the point that there will still be sexual abuse. We are not doing, let me remind you, we are not doing enough. Yes, there will always be abusers. There will always be evil people on earth. But there is clearly a problem in our society if the cases keep on going up with no downward trend. Let me remind you, we stand strong in our opposition to the moot that the laws and policies and institutions that are aimed at protecting children in Dominica from sexual exploitation and abuse are adequate. Thank you.
I want to commend the team on making eye contact. Oftentimes we hear the comments that you should not just be looking down at the paper, but even if there were views of the paper at some point in time, we saw that each individual would put up their head and look to the left, look to the right, acknowledging the judges and whatnot. So this is excellent. We want to encourage you to keep this up. There was passion coming out at some point during the debates, and we want to encourage that because it brings about an added level of conviction. When you're debating about a topic as important as this, you want to show the people that it's not just presenting information, but you believe what you're saying about the information. So we want to encourage you to continue this practice. It was clear that research was done. In all the years of my life, I learned things today that I've heard about for the first time. So I want to say thank you to the youth. They say that the youth are the future, and the youth opens up the eyes of adults, sometimes things that we overlook. So we appreciate you putting so much effort into this topic that you presented on today.
The proposing team from the Orion Academy scored a total of 615 points. The opposing team from Arthur Waldron SDA Academy scored a total of 689 points. Therefore, the winning team from Arthur Waldron SDA Academy, Ms. Berger Bertrand and Ms. Shereen Carbon. The best speaker for today is Berger Bertrand from the Arthur Waldron